Here yet. Hello, Tony.
Hey,
Hey,
Barry,
Tony.
Audrey, nice seeing your beautiful face. The one and only Doug Fern, ladies and gentlemen. Yes.
Thank you,
Wow.
Tony. Thank you.
Honored to see you here, man. Honored.
I'm honored to be here.
Man. So you shipping you got something new?
Yeah, Barry's going to talk about that, and I'll answer questions.
Cool.
I don't have it in my possession. I was hoping to at least have it and start my process to talk about it, but it's called VNE. It's a stereo compressor, right, Doug? 2 channels.
Well, the VNE is actually a mono version of our VT7, which is a 2-channel stereo, although you can use the channels separately. It's out under the Hazelrig Industries brand. Joff Hazelrig worked for me as an assembler for many years, and now, as of a couple of years ago, Joff and his brother George have taken over the manufacturing for me, which frees me up to do new product development. And one of the things that we wanted to do was a single channel version of the VT7. So it's repackaged, it's smaller, it's 1 channel. We cut out some of the features of the VT7 just to make it more compact and a little more cost effective. Otherwise, it sounds exactly the same.
Wow.
Awesome.
Hey, Doug, it's in one of these magazines, isn't it? I thought I saw it a day or two ago.
There's advertising for it. I've seen
Very nice review in some magazine recently, under the Hazelrig brand.
Yeah. There was a review and mix of actually their whole product line, including the VNE, which was a really nice review.
Yeah, so we'll be doing one on the VNE for Resolution magazine. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that magazine. It's a
Pretty cool
UK
magazine.
Yeah.
UK based, and
Most of the good ones are.
I'm starting to write for them. I had 2 in the last issue, 2 reviews, and got one coming up. I think they do every 2 months. I think it's the January, February issue. I'll have a review of the Austrian Audio headphones, if anyone's into that, over their open air. Dynamic.
Let me just say hello to everybody, and thanks everybody for coming to Tech Breakfast. Happy New Year. It's can't believe it. It's 2022, so it's very cool stuff. I'm just going to I just want to thank everybody, and then Barry's got a couple things he's going to talk about. We're going to have a short Tech Breakfast today, kind of get us into the new year, and I've got a question at the end we can kind of jump into. But take it away, Barry. And at first, you were going to talk about Doug's stuff, right?
Yeah, well, I don't have too much. I don't have too much to say about it other than what's already been said here. I was hoping to have it in my hands and at least plug it in and see what it does. But I can't even do that yet. It's not here yet.
Maybe by the next Tech Breakfast, we'll have it and we can show it off and all that kind of good stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. So,
Doug, you got enough of your own products behind you there?
We just did a session not too long ago where we were trying to do tracks for Atmos, and I have 16 channels of mic preamp here, and we didn't have enough. So I got to put more stuff. Need another rack.
That's a work of art behind you, my friend. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I know. It pleases me.
all those red panels. Wow.
Yeah.
I know, it's just wonderful. All right, take it away, Bear.
Okay, I will. I think I'll talk about this split EQ. A lot of questions about that, and it's kind of a hot product right now. Let's just go ahead and share that screen. Am I going to do that? Let's see here. There we go. Okay, you should see it, I think, right now. I'm trying something a little different here. I've got a mono feed coming into to the interface for Zoom, and on the other channel is this mic. So I hope this works. But anyway, this is a GUI of split EQ at Eventide's, baby, and it is an 8 frequency parametric equalizer. These mono or stereo. You can see the 8. If I mouse over the sections that are in, let's put that one in. And so being parametric, you of course can change the Q and the bandwidth. The two outer are high, or this is a high pass filter shape, and at the other end is a low pass filter shape. Now, with split EQ and there's 2 or 3 other plugins that do this sort of thing. It separates the audio into the transient, that's green colored, and master fader, and the tonal, the blue color master fader. So if you just, hope this works, you should be hearing a loop, right, Tony? Everyone hears a loop, right? Okay. So you can see, you can adjust even without doing anything, even if I bypassed these EQs, you can actually adjust the relationship between the attack or the transient portion and the tonal. This is the waveform coming in. Let's see here. There's the spectral. And even if I just don't do any EQ and just do that, so now we're just hearing, I'll turn it up. That is just what they call the tonal. It's everything but the transient. And of course, conversely, I could do this. That's just the transient part. Now, the whole thing with this equalizer is that you're able to separately adjust the EQ of these parts of the sound. So let me stop it. So when you grab a node, right now I'm at 408. I can also separately adjust, in this case, I'm separately adjusting the transient energy at that frequency. So I can make the transient louder. Whoops, I gotta be careful. I can make the transient louder and leave the tonal alone. And conversely, I could boost the tonal and leave the transient alone. So that's kind of the gag of the whole thing right there in a nutshell. And you have 8 bands to do this in, and you can overlap, you can add them together if you're not getting what you want. It also works in stereo. Now in stereo, we're listening to mono, but if I go to stereo, then you have pan pots. This is where it gets interesting, because I don't know if you can see, but there's a green pan pot and a blue pan pot. So if I move the green one to the left and the blue one to the right, it's actually moving those peaks left and right. Even though they're the same frequency, they're shifted left and right. So I'll leave it to you guys to come up with some ideas for that, but they are pretty cool to do. So that's split EQ. So without being I'm going to stop sharing.
That's pretty cool, dude.
If you know the whole thing with something like this, and people have a lot of questions, and sure, if you can solo any one of those bands, including any of either the transient or the tonal. And when you pan them like that in stereo, you're going to get some phase weirdness. So just get over it. Yeah, just get over it, okay?
That was the question, whether or not you get, when you mono them up, if you get phasing.
Well, you're hearing mono right now. It's not too bad. I can break it. If you get extreme, I can make it do that. But listen, these aren't times to be this purist thing. Nobody cares about purity anymore anyway. No, I'm kidding. No, no, this is trickery, and it's going to have that sort of caveat. So in the review, one thing a lot of people don't realize, let me go back to screen sharing. One thing that people forget to do is down on the bottom, there's a algorithm tuning section. And when you click on it, I had full drum kit for this loop. But if you were messing around with the guitar, you would pick guitar. What this does is it tunes the splitting algorithm for that kind of signal. So you got to do that first. But you can take a mono sound and EQ it in such a way, and then pan the EQ left and right and get a spread. But as I caution in the review, you always want to check these things in mono to see if it's getting too flangy, phasey, and weird stuff disappears, especially on a mix. I don't think I would use this on a mix. Now, someone asked about the transient and the tonal nodes here, which are the same frequency, except for the filters at each end. At the filters at each end, you can actually split off. So here's the transient, which I'm moving higher in frequency, and the tonal lower in frequency. So this is a high pass, and then down here, same bit with the low pass. So you can move. There we go. Oh, I had band 6. God. So now you can move. Of course, you can change. You can do something like 96 dB per octave. I mean, listen, when you get into EQ, and you know this from using any kind of parametric EQ, when you get into these kinds of curves, all bets are off in terms of phase distortion, but it's sure a lot of fun doing it. Anyway, I had a good time reviewing it. Maybe you guys come up with some cool presets. Certainly great for fixing anything. You can go in and, for example, say you have a kick drum that is doesn't have any tonality or very little, but lots of front. You can take the front down and EQ it in such a frequency that mixes a little better. All I can tell you is you're not going to leave home for a while with this thing. With this thing in your folder. This thing is pretty deep. So I'm going to show a couple more things. One is, let's show Tony. Tony asked me to do this. This is something new from Paul Wolf. Paul here yet? I want to just put this right up in the camera. It's the best way to do being 1U. Whoops.
Upside down, yeah.
Yeah, I got you. This is called a blender. So the blender is a way to add wet dry to hardware gear. So wet dry is big in plugins, of course. So this unit is still kind of prototype, but you can think of it as 4 2-in, 1-output mixers. So what happens is, and say output 1, you have mute buttons, and you have polarity flip for each input. So there's 4 mixers here, 2-in, 1-out. You can link 2 to be in stereo by pushing that button. Now these 2 are a stereo, and they control from the single controls over here. So input 1 is going to have your dry signal, let's say, and you have a control. Let me get my hand on it. So you have this control he calls blend. So if you put it all the way to dry, you get only that signal. When you go to wet, then you get only the output of the processor that you have hooked to this thing. So if you like to do parallel compression with a compressor, and it's a hardware compressor, they usually don't have wet dry controls. So you just hook the in and out to this unit, and you will produce a way to blend the wet and the dry. So this is an offshoot from his console, because all of the inserts on every channel has a blend, wet dry, every single insert. So all of the channels on his board, you're able to if you patch in a compressor to do a vocal, you're able to actually blend between the output of the compressor and what's going into the compressor. In other words, dry to wet. So this is a blender from Paul Wolf. This is a prototype. It's a little rough, but it works.
Hey,
Are
Barry,
those
can you
just
show us the back of that
perforated
unit?
Oh, yeah, the back is prototype. It would be, let me just take the power out for a second. So the back would be, so you're gonna have, let's go over here. So this would be the out, I'll put my finger on it. This is the output of channel 1, and then it needs one more XLR for the input. Right now, there's only 2. So he's gonna add, so it'll be all XLRs on the back. That answer your question? Because each channel's got to have three input XLRs. So you patch, this is the master output for channel 1. And then you would have the channel 1, which going into the compressor. And then you would have another jack that would go out of the compressor. So you can loop the compressor in here, and then you would have one output. So it's missing XLRs. It'll be XLRs all the way across. These go bye-bye, by the way. This some other idea. Prototype. Does that answer it? No? Yeah? Okay. And the last thing to show is, this has been out for a while, but I just thought this is really a handy gadget. They have a Facebook users page, and this is great for live sound people that are always hooking up and setting up stuff out in the field and want to test it really quickly. It's called Sound Bullet.
Does it double as a vape?
As a what?
A vape.
I don't think so.
That was a good one.
So it puts out a 1K or white or pink noise into an input. You can check phantom power with it. You can check polarity. You can check things like your preamp. It has a headphone jack. So it's a complete cable checker with an analog signal, not just an ohm meter.
Who makes that?
It's made by Sonnet. Let me see something here. Hang on. Here's a better picture.
Seems like something people could just, engineers should have in their arsenal of stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, here's my page on it. Probably a little better picture, but Sonnet, Sound Bullet. Yeah, the thing is that you can do all this on your own. You don't have to ask somebody else to do something while you're out in the room. So good little gadget. Volume control. So
Very cool.
So that's kind of, there's other stuff, but I don't want to like bore everybody, but there you go.
Not boring, but that's a good one. Is that shipping now?
Oh yeah, it's been out for quite a while. Yeah, I mean, if you want to borrow it, Tony, sometime. I ran into it again. I mean, I get a lot of gadgets like this. Seldom are they very useful, or they're more home stereo kind of stuff,
Dylan just put a link to it in the chat room. Hey,
Awesome.
Dylan.
Good.
Very
All right.
cool.
There you go.
I think
Yeah.
Kurt's got something.
Yeah, Kurt, go.
I do?
Thought you did.
Well, I could always, I do have something. Yurtrock.com. YURTROCK.com. Yurtrock. It's a collection of loops and samples from my lovely home studio here in Westlake Village. So, because we all don't have money, you can't afford to cart me over to your place. You could press me on a keyboard and have the same thing.
Not really, but
and I won't eat your food or drink your coffee. And it's a low price. I forgot what it is, but yeah, it's cool to have.
Are they just
Wesco
samples
pedals,
of
of
you?
course.
Are they loops or just samples?
Loops and samples. And also, they were converted to MIDI as well. So
So does it come with a player?
soon, but it all loads up as MIDI files and or WAV files. So it's just a drag and drop kind of thing. So you could drag and drop it into your favorite, your battery or any sort of player that will read WAV files.
Very cool. You cut all this stuff at the house?
Yes. And then sent it to Nashville, and then they edited it, which took all of 2 days. Well, 2 days for me to record all my various kits and stuff, but then, the editing was probably like a month.
I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah. I'll put a link in.
Yeah, put a link in there,
Yeah,
dude.
please do.
Right.
I was recently forced to learn how to use samples after all these years. And I immediately discovered most of the stuff out there isn't what you need. So the more you have in your arsenal, the better.
Absolutely.
You got anything, Mr. Boddicker?
I see him. Welcome, Michael.
I'm just putting in my full theatrical Atmos system. So today, before the end of the fiscal year, I'm making the purchase for the extra 2 subwoofers that go on the, what is that? There's 20 surrounds, and replacing and adding, or not replacing, but adding a second dual 18 sub in the front. I have already purchased the all but 2 of the surround speakers. 2 of the overheads I still have to get, and then the amplifiers, I'm going with those Crown. I bought a bunch of multi-channel Crowns, which is different because I've been using Bryston and Perot's on all my surrounds, and I know I'm going to have a slight difference, but it should still be great. I've had them all tweaked and spec'd, and it'll be a beautiful thing. I'm looking forward to that. I had SonarWorks over this week, and SonarWorks is making me a multi-channel Atmos equalization, phase linear equalization with no delay that actually will allow me to do what I've done on my 5.1 system, which, if I understand from them, I'm the only 5.1 system that's got a multi-channel SonarWorks in the world, at least the one that they know of. They came in and put it in, inspect it and stuff. And now we're going to do the Atmos system, the same thing with the SonarWorks. So everything that's been going out of here translates great. But very honestly, the Gary Lux has got that the Richard Furch, a lot of people have the Atmos nailed already, and I wasn't looking to do TV and records as much as I'm looking to do theatrical. So it gives, there are some problems, like when you look at the Marantz amplifier for taking and decoding a DVD or a Blu-ray rather that has that is Atmos encoded, you only have 13 channels out. Well, why am I setting up a 25 channel system if I can only play back 13 channel, or anybody can ever at a home system play back 13 channels? There are some interesting problems to overcome, but I'm looking forward to it. And I am, if anybody has any suggestions, I've got a 4,500 lumen screen, which is great, except that I prefer to keep my curtains open, which means that I get some daylight. I like not just sitting in a cement box, so I can see outside, I can see the greenery and stuff the way I built it. And I'm looking to get, something like a 7,000 to 10,000 lumen projector that won't break the bank and can be, I think it's 23 feet away from the screen, and has to be able to, what do you call that, splay?
Who's your speaker manufacturer for your surround?
Oh, I'm only using JBL because every theater that I go to has JBL. So I'm keeping everything the way that I go to see it in a movie theater. So everything translates great. You know, it'd be nice to have, you know, I see a lot of PMC and I'm sure they sound great. PMC is a great system, but I don't go to any movie theater where I see an Atmos system that has PMC in it. So I'm looking to do.
Well, one of the things is that you're mixing for theatrical Atmos. Now, when people like Gary Lux and Dave Way, they're mixing Atmos music, which is near field, and that's a big mystery to a lot of people. It's a different ball game when you go to theatrical with big rooms and what you're covering and all that stuff. That's a different animal almost. So that's the reason why the post people do not want you to turn in Atmos mixes for a movie, for example. They prefer you just give them stereo or something.
Hey, I'm sorry. What was that statement?
I said they
prefer that you turn in stereo?
Not Atmos, not Atmos music mixes. This is my understanding.
Oh, see, now everyone that even the regular stuff that we do, like regular film scores, we have to turn in 5.1 stems of everything.
Well, that's different. 5.1 is not Atmos.
No, it's not, but it's not stereo.
Okay, 5.1 then.
Yeah.
So is the general consensus that everybody would rather have you turn in 5.1, period, as opposed to Atmos?
It depends. Hey, Tony, the answer, from my experience, right, working in post-production, working on the projects I do mostly television and mostly, OTT, right? The bottom line is that we prefer 5.1 for a music mix or 7.1 or surround sound as opposed to an Atmos. And the reason for that, it allows us to do the better separation on our end quicker. Because it's all about deadlines. Hey, Michael, I have a question for you. What's your position with regard to your center? Like, how far away from your center speaker are you? Because you mentioned you're mixing for theatrical, and that's a pretty deep mix. That's a pretty deep distance. How far away are you from your center?
Well, we based our room when we built it on a New York studio that was doing medium budget, $15 to $30 million films. And we have our room is from the back of the bass trap, which is a 7-foot bass trap, to the 3 feet behind the screen. It's 32 feet. So from my center speaker to me, in this situation, I'm just going to, without breaking out the original drawings, I think I'm 17 feet. It's not like, going, I'm not able to with my space go to Technicolor, so something like that, or go to Sony or one of those big rooms at Sony. So, but what we've been experiencing is when we take it here and we go over to the Lemley, or we even had one that went over to Man's Chinese, it sounds exactly the same as in our house. It's great.
That's awesome. So your surrounds are set up in an array system with what monitoring control are you using at this time?
I have a separate Pro Tools rig. So the way I did it, and again, this is about all to change because we're going into using matrices and stuff like that, a matrix, but right now, what I've got is my Pro Tools rig, which is, I call it my mix rig. It goes through a studio. Alex, can you look on there and tell me what the name of that studio controller is? Speaker controller. So when I went out to one of those mix events at Sony, I saw that before the Matrix came out, they had a 7.1 system, and then for the overheads, they had a separate quad system or a 5.1 system that they only used as quad. So that's what I have in here. Is I have 2 systems, one for the overhead and one for the 7.1, which again, all I'm using right now. I've only done really one mix in a DTX. Everything else has been straight ahead surround. So I have then after, because I want a knob before I hit 16,000 watts of power, I want a knob with an off switch on it.
Yeah.
It happens, right?
Yeah.
So that's what makes me anxious about having just a matrix that's tied into my Pro Tools rig, and it locks up, and all of a sudden my ability to just shut the speakers off goes away. So I go through that speaker controller, and then I go to a separate Pro Tools rig that has the Sonar Works in it, and all the EQ, and it splits out to the triamping for the front speakers. The left, center, right are triamped Brysons, and so then it goes out to that, mix rig, studio controller with volume control, and then the speaker controller with all the splitting for the triamping and the surrounds. And I can easily change then between, if I'm mixing on my near fields, my, what are they, 6328, the LSR 6328 Ps, I think that's the right number. And that's my near field. And then I can push the session and go to a stereo with or without a sub on the bigs. I can go to the 5.1. I can go to the 5.1 with surrounds, with quad surrounds. I can, it's really easy, really easy. And
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah, no, I totally get it. Yeah, the interesting when you come on when you said you went with the JBL series as far as your speaker systems, and the question about the monitoring was, did you shy away? Because I run JBL, I run Crown amplifiers, and with the Crown amplifiers, what you're going to love is that, to your point, you can go in there and set a limited threshold within the software. I believe it's called QNet or high QNet or something like that. I don't know the terminology, the actual software. I know how to use it. But the thing is, you go in there, you set your frequency. So you have like almost 8 to 12 bands of EQ within the amplifier itself per channel. And then I have then the JBL Untitled, this has another separate 8 channels for the flat response. And then each user, when somebody comes into my room, a different mixer, they want to select their user profile, they select that in the room. I can slightly adjust that for them to make them happy as a user. And it works really, really well.
Can I ask you a question, Louis? The X curve, is that even applicable anymore?
No, it's a big thing. Just a little history. I worked over at Sing Sound in New York City when it became, just prior to become digital cinema. And, the X curve does exist, but it exists in my eyes. I think it truly exists when you have that, you're 24 feet away from the center. You know what I mean? Where you're that, 40 feet away, to your point, I don't use it. I had it the hardest time to really configure it with someone who came in and helped me out. And then when I heard it, I said, it doesn't translate well at all from anything I'd done in the past that I had approval on. So, I don't know if Adobe's asking you to do it, but I think Adobe has their own. I know Adobe has their own curve. You're running the mastering suite, so they probably recommend a particular curve that they have, and I believe it's posted under the professional support at Adobe.com, website.
Yeah, I have all those curves, but I put them all in the EQ. I use phase accurate EQs in the second Pro Tools rig, which has the speaker alignment in it, and I do all that EQ pre-amplifier. So
right, yeah. And did you enjoy it? Did you feel that it worked well for you in your room?
Oh, it just changed my life. The idea at the time I built this, which is 11 years ago, right? Okay. So we were looking, and I was even actually thinking about going to Logic at that point. We went ahead with this system, and the only alternative that I really saw was the Blue. And the Blue, although it sounds great and it's incredible for huge auditoriums and being able to phase reverse whatever the speaker is that's in the tunnel, so that you then cancel out the nodes and stuff like that. I mean, that's phenomenal. But I couldn't push a button and change my speaker setups. And this way I can do it like that.
Well, a lot of the controllers today, that's a whole nother market. I tell people when they ask me what's my recommendation, say go by preference. If you can test them out, test them out. Ask for a studio that's local or take a trip, because the money you're investing in that is really worth it.
There's no definitive, Lou, or Lou or Michael, there's no definitive controller that everyone goes to, like that's the one to get.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, the Matrix. People are in the big stages. They're using the Matrix.
Yeah, and it's a convenience thing, honestly, because everybody says, well, you have the EQ patterns, right? And I say, well, technically with the amplifiers, I have an EQ setup, and as well as with Intonato, I have an EQ setup, which is designed for the room. And then I have 30 user presets. So which technically each user preset has almost 30, presets under that. So, but
Lou, real quick, which Crown amp is it that has that built-in EQ? Is it the DCI series? The DA series?
DCS, what is it? DCS 600. I'm running 600 watts. I have 8 channels, 2 units in here. I'm planning to get, because I also have, I'm planning to get the 12, what is it? I'm either going to get another pair, stereo 600 watt unit for the subs, because I have 2 C45, 45.
The ones with Dante, man, good luck. They're gone.
I have Dante. My system is set up in Dante because I'm running, I purchased early on, I caught a great deal on it. I'm running a BBS Blu-ray to Dante, because the Crown amplifiers are Blu-ray. I'm not running my Crown amps are not Dante.
Huh.
I'm converting, I'm using the Dante 64 virtual card, and I'm converting that from Dante to Blu-ray, not Blu-ray, to a Blu-Link, and then feed that Crown amps.
Do you run into latency issues with that?
Not at all. That's the first thing somebody asked me. So I've been purchasing small little, these little guys. I don't know if you can see it from here, but they're the Dante, Dante 2 channels XLR.
Yeah.
And one of the sales guys was like, "Oh, you're going to run to latency." I said, listen, the latency you're going to have is the same latency you might have with certain inputs on certain, interfaces, right? But I said, let me just give it a shot. So I'm running them because those are feeding my my binaural mix, if you will, because that's coming out of I have a small, what is it, SSL 6 or whatever it's called. So I run 2 channels out of that stereo pair.
You do a binaural mix.
I'm sorry?
You do a binaural mix.
I listen to it because that's what everybody wants to listen to at the end of the day. It's all going to headphones. That's why when, if I'm asked by my client to say, what's the recommendation? I say, well, when I work with a composer, orchestra piece, I try to say, let's go with 7 if we can. But if it really depends what you're listening to as a composer. I don't want to taint your project. I can't touch your intellectual property, what you created, what you feel the response should have been at that scene, at that time code, right? I want to hear back what you produce. I want you to feel comfortable when you come in. I can hear it the same way at home, and you hear it here, right? So it translates well. But I try to push up to 7.1 so I can get away with pushing things to the rear a little bit easier. That makes life easier, to be honest. We're not really moving, with cinematic rooms. And what is this, Tai Chi, getting a little bit of cheating on that surround mix. I can feed things and play. I got tricks for that, by the way. I run that on the second computer. Reduces my latency.
So are you using your EarPod Pros for your binaural mix, or what are you using for headphones?
Okay, so I did my own beta testing. I did get my EarPod Pros, I did get the Max, and I didn't know that the Max has a cable capability, and I have to check that out. But I think it's a USB. I'm going to check that out real soon. But with the Maxes, the translation for me they didn't warrant me spending $600 or $500 for them. I have the Sennheiser 650s that I'm using off the SSL that I monitored through. They sound phenomenal. I know everybody in the room has heard them, used them, played with them. They love them, I guess, or hate them. But at the end of the day, that's what I went with. The Max to me just didn't, I did an A/B with a couple of different headphones, and I ended up going, is it worth it right now? I'm really fearful that they're going to grab onto Apple, will say, you know what, hey, let's fix what's broken, and that'll be the new one. And if they say to me, hey, it's $700, guess what? I may jump on that because that's their Gen 2 model. They usually, when they release something, let's go real, they release something, they don't make it right the first time, second time, and that was my option there. But that's what I'm monitoring my binaurals with. And
right.
when I do anything So this room was built during the pandemic. So realistically, I am looking for a way to translate everything, and I just put out MP4s essentially.
And you've got a 7.1 room?
No, it's 11.1.4. So I have 11 speakers going all the way around, and then 2 subwoofers in the front, which is really just the dot one. Okay. And then I have the 4 on top. So everything around the room is a combination hybrid. It is truly JBL 7 series and above. And then I'm running 3 series in the lower half, only because I've been waiting for Dolby and Pro Tools to finalize where they're landing with, because they took away the whole certification of the rooms when everybody started jumping on in 2020, get your room certified. It doesn't exist. In reality, you're spending a lot of money on these speakers, and sure enough, you have, I hate to say it this way, but you have really, people producing phenomenal stuff on basically, Radio Shack speakers, man, of any type and size. No criticism to anybody, please. But,
the IQ multimedia speakers are terrific.
Yeah. Well, they're great for playback and tell you what you did right or wrong, right? Sometimes, for referencing. Yeah, you have an awesome setup, Mike. It's just out of curiosity, I apologize, I should know a little bit more about you, but are you in New York or in LA?
Oh, I'm here in LA. Yeah. When I moved here in 1973, every record that I read the back of said recorded in Hollywood, California. That's why I came here.
You're one of the smart ones that took off early on, huh? Okay, I get it.
So the studio, it's the Studio.com that I use now. And I'm looking at the Grace and
Trinov.
I'm sorry?
Trinov.
Yeah.
Trinov Demon is kind of the new, I don't know, they're French company.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
I went with the Trinov. It's fantastic.
Who has one?
I got one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tony,
can I mention, I signed the contract yesterday to go forward with I had already signed the contract for Synthplex 2 years ago, and we've been pushing the date, but we finalized the date. We are going to have Synthplex at the end of October of this year. So it's looking like, with as fast as Omicron moved through, I did put in, as a force majeure, if there's another variant that comes through and just wipes everybody out, we will be pushing again. But right now, we're really thinking that we can safely do the kind of show we want to do, shoulder to shoulder. We can see everybody. You can, put your hands on stuff and turn knobs. I think at the end,
back in Burbank.
Yeah, it'll be it's just the only place we can find here. I mean, we could do a place in Pasadena, but that's a union house, and if you can imagine having electronic equipment and having somebody say, no, you can't plug that in. I have to plug it in for you.
That's like New York again, like New York AUS.
Yeah, so we're doing Burbank Marriott again, the convention center. Yeah.
And just for the record, so Lou, your system's an 11.1.4, and Michael, your system is what?
Well, right now, the capability that I have 6 individual surround speakers and 3, the 3 main speakers in the front. We are going to, what I have purchased and sitting behind me, ready to install, is our 12 on this plane and 8 above. So 20 surround speakers plus the 3 and 2 subs in front, and subs on the surrounds as well.
Jeepers on creepers, dude. That's a huge system.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, but what I don't know. For what I think about, where do I go when I enjoy watching a great film, like when I went to see Dune and Spider-Man and stuff. You go to these Atmos rooms. That's the sound I want to be able to do. So, I'm looking at the next 20, 25 years of my life and thinking, what do I want to be involved in? That's what I'd like to be involved in. And I'm putting it in such a manner that as things change, that I can easily swap speakers and I can easily change locations and stuff. Right now, the specs come back where Dolby shows all the speakers kind of at ear level. And you go to a movie theater and they're never at ear level. If you had them at ear level, people would be poking their fingers through the speakers. They have to be above your arm reach. So they have to be at least 9 feet, 10 feet off the ground. And I'm just trying to duplicate where I want my product to end up.
Yeah.
Dylan, are you putting in a surround?
Yeah, I'm going through the construction right now, but it's a 7.1.4 with the Trinov system, PMCs, and then they're all Result 6s except for the 2.2 sub. And then on my ceiling speakers, they're PMC TB 4 pluses that are powered by Brysons. And then I'm kind of doing stereo in the same environment that I'm doing the immersive stuff. And so, I still have my typical stereo setup of like the PMC, IB1Ss or whatever. And then right now I've got Genelec 1032s and then NS10s just for a client that I'm working with that's comfortable with the Genelecs. But yeah, it's
no Oratones?
No Oratones. I mean, I do have the Raven that has the old Betty speaker on it, which is kind of our mimicking of the prison radio or whatever you want to call it. But I do have Oratones. I just don't have them set up right now. Typically I would have like NS10s, Oratones, and then the PMCs. That's
and what are you using as your controller?
The Trinov. And then the Trinov has I'm waiting on the actual remote to show up. It's called like the LA remote or whatever. Should be here by the end of February. But in the meantime, you can use the Avid dock to control the Trinov system. And so it's kind of cool to have a fader that I can motorize, put my iPad on, all the stuff that the dock does. In addition to that, it will actually control the Trinov system. And so, it's a nice setup. Trinov, it's pricey, but it does a lot more than just monitor controlling. I'm in a confined environment that I'm not able to do proper construction in. And, I was really skeptical I'm always skeptical about room EQ and all of this kind of stuff. And, time aligning speakers and all of this stuff. It's like, oh, come on. And because I think we've heard a lot of bad versions of it. The Trinov one, I went in extremely skeptical. First with the stereo stuff. We used it in the stereo environment, and it really, really fixed a lot of the issues we had in this one particular room that construction was out of the question. I ended up getting a consumer version of Trinov and was really impressed with how it sounded in my home stereo. And so then I ended up going with the Demon 12, I guess, for the actual Atmos rig. And in addition to this, one of the problems I have is my main client is signed to Epic Record, which is, I guess, is under the Sony umbrella. So they're asking for Atmos delivery as well as the GD 360 RA, which is a format I just hate. There's just there's problems with everything. And I think a lot of these companies, if you talk to the people, whether it be Dolby or Avid with, discussing why can't we just mix like we did 5.1 inside Pro Tools? Why do I have to go through this Atmos bridge bull crap? There's a lot of people that are admitting, oh, by the way, there's a limiter that a lot of people don't know about, or there's a lot of stuff that's happening, or even Apple's codec being different than the Dolby codec. I mean, these are things that are a freaking mess to an audio engineer who's getting in it the first time and wants to learn the rules. It's like we're realizing that the rules are kind of shifting all the time.
Wild West.
Yeah, and like Michael was talking about, kind of waiting for the dust to settle, I guess, in a sense of is Apple going to come up with a new version of headphones that does something even more crazy, and we're all going to be scrambling to adjust to have an extra whatever? We never really know, and this is such a huge investment. I mean, even if we're talking about using, Radio Shack speakers or whatever for Atmos rigs and stuff like that. A big part of that is even like I went with the PMC Result 6s, which are considered budget PMCs, but that's still a significant kind of purchase just for those speakers if you're just talking about, filling up your room with, 7 of them. And so we have to be, and on top of all of this, there's so many mix engineers that are doing this BS where they're submitting a mix and then they're literally using, say, Halo, or either upmix software, or they're taking their stems and they have a template and they just feed everything in the template literally without monitoring and listening to what it's doing. They're just like, okay. And they're submitting that as an extra Atmos mix for an additional like $500 on top of, say, the $2,000 they're getting paid to mix the stereo version. This kills me because I spend a lot of time on all the Atmos stuff that I work on. Like I spend at least a day per Atmos mix, even if I have the stems. And maybe I'm just slow. That could be the case. But to me, it's like, why are we spending all this money and all of this gear and all this equipment for an extra 500 on top of what we're doing? That's bull crap. You know,
and
then
all to add fake stuff to the extra speakers we just hung on the ceiling.
Yeah. And on top of that, you know, some of the stuff that I'm getting
Which
from
I have.
people.
I've drank the Kool-Aid, but
Yeah. But I mean, it's, you know, and there is a fun, like, I think that we've already been through the 5.1 pitfalls of, I think everybody that first did their 5.1 mix had the guitar solo spinning circles around your head and all that kind of silly Mickey Mouse crap. I think we know better than to do that kind of stuff. And we want to make things sound more authentic for the most part, or at least suspension of disbelief is treated appropriately. A lot of the music that I work on, say it's urban music, the snare drum doesn't have to sound like a snare drum. It can sound like somebody bashing your face against a phone book. Yeah. And so in that environment, Atmos is freed from a lot of the constraints that you maybe have if you're working on a bluegrass record, where it should sound like you're kind of sitting in front of a bluegrass group.
Right.
And so
Dylan,
there's different sets of challenges.
If I can, there's a really good example of what you were talking about with the guitar thing spinning around, that where it doesn't work. If you go to Spider-Man in Atmos, there's a thing where the doctor, is it Dr. No or Doctor Who? He's spinning. He spins a circle of flame, and they go into another direction, and then it comes from the point of view on the other side of that other dimension, and they put the flame. It's just at the very beginning of the movie. They put the flame circle in the back, and it still makes you want to go like that. I mean, if you're watching a picture up here, you don't want any of that stuff back there. That's going to take your attention away from the screen ahead of you. And they only did it one time, and at the beginning of the film, and at the rest of the film, they just kept the focus up front. That it really, that spinny kind of stuff, really, as much as I have friends who want to make products that spin things around the 8 channels, and I'm just going, dude, Why? It's up here. I'm watching up here. That's where it needs to be. A car goes over my head. A jet goes over my head. Something comes in from that quickly. Yeah, I get it, but not where in Planet of the Apes, early Atmos mix. They go into the big auditorium. The ape is speaking, and because they're still in that day trying to keep everything centralized in the center speaker for the dialogue. You hear the echo of this huge auditorium only in the center speaker, because they're going to take and do it in German, and the M&E is not going to want to have all those effects in it. They have a thing where the horse walks up. They walk up with the horses, and the horses behind you here pawing and nickering and whatever. And it just makes you want to turn around. The whole idea of that anything that's back here is like a tiger sneaking up on you. They were not really thinking that it was going to be as extreme as it is. It makes you want to. It's either annoying or it makes you want to turn around and look. And again, focus here.
Pretty cool, though.
Yeah, I mean, I've been struggling because honestly, the majority of the Atmos stuff that I've been doing in terms of bulk work has been it's been live concert stuff, and that can be a mess whenever there's different camera shots of like, well, I still hear the drums, or over here, or the guitarist over here, or whatever, and they just submitted something for me. It was the band is recording in the round. And so now it's like, okay, could you guys please give me a video reference? It doesn't have to be a final edit. They're like, well, we don't really know how we're going to cut this stuff until we actually have the audio, which is sometimes a ass backwards kind of thing. Like, do we mix the audio and then cut video to it? Or do we, it's something we deal with it seems like every time they submit it to me, we're doing it a different way. But I try to have a visual representation so I can kind of make sure that, we're actually authentic. There's weird stuff that can happen if you're like, oh, they messed up that word. And if I import the acapella from, say, the record that I mixed, and I put that word in there, whenever they clearly have the mic down by their side, it's going to seem weird. So even mistakes you have to kind of take account for. But, these are also different things. Like I think the post market is where I get excited about Atmos. I want to see the rocket shoot up to the ceiling and all this kind of stuff. In music, what I find myself doing is going crazy with the interludes on records, where I'm like, okay, let's have some fun with this because we can get away with it. And then whenever the songs actually kid in, it kind of brings us back to reality in a sense of like, okay, now things actually sound proper. I think Tom Petty's You Don't Know How It Feels is probably one of the better Atmos mixes I've heard. I've heard a lot of, stuff that I thought was just ruined. I think we've all kind of fell in love with a lot of these records that are being redone. And we're all like, wait a second, what are you guys doing to this art? It's like, doing a virtual reality version of Mona Lisa or Scream or whatever. Those are kind of neat things, but some art I don't want to be a theme park ride. And that's always been one of my problems with a lot of these Marvel movies is I don't enjoy them like other people do, because I'm like, I don't want to be at Universal Studios right now. I just want to be at AMC and engaged in the storyline or whatever. So some of the stuff just gets distracting to me. So, whenever I'm doing music, I try to, there's a time and a place for doing some psychedelic cool stuff to freak out the hippies, if they're listening in binaural or if they do have a proper system. But I mean, this is another thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have gone over to their Super Bowl party and they've got a 5.1 thing and their sub is just all the way up cranked. And every time a commercial kicks on, I think there's a dump truck driving by outside, so it's another classic thing of like, do we compensate for, what we're doing? Or like, Michael was mentioning speaker placement of the Dolby spec versus what you actually see whenever you go to the movie theater. And that's something that I think is a serious consideration for a lot of us. But at some point we got to damn the torpedoes and move forward and make art. So,
yeah. The at the mix presentation, that immersive thing they do out on the Sony lot, or they were doing, and they'll hopefully start up again. By the way, I have real hope. I see a lot of people that are still thinking that this is like a long time before we get through this. I really hope. I really have hope that we're going to get through this quickly, or not quickly. It's been 2 years, but within another year we'll be back together. The Aura 3D presentation that was done, the guy explained life very simply. He said, we exist on this plane. We exist. We see what we see in front of us, and then what's up above us. The birds are in the trees, the wind is in the trees, the rustling and all that stuff, and that's what's up there. The rest of life happens here. And usually if you're talking to somebody, it's right in front of you. And anything that you're facing toward and paying attention to is right in front of you. And if something's behind you, if a bicyclist is coming up on the sidewalk or whatever, it's dangerous. It's left over from the tiger sneaking up on you. And he explained it that simply. And I've taken that approach in my mixes that life still happens here. And the rest of it is ambient. And he even explained, he said, when a jet flies overhead, it is not overhead. It comes from the ground. The sound of the jet is actually coming off the ground. It's not an overhead thing. It doesn't have to be in your surround speakers. It has to be here where it's hitting the ground and bouncing up at you. So anyway, I always thought I apply that, and I appreciate that when I go to see good mixes.
Is anybody else putting in? I mean, Audrey, are you installing any surround rooms, or is anybody else doing any other room?
I've got my Atmos system coming online this week, basically.
So you're mastering the Atmos stuff? I thought when we had a conversation like 2 months ago, I thought that was a thing that you guys weren't sure what you guys were doing.
Not sure. I'm still not sure I'm doing it, but I'm doing it.
Audrey, are you wiring a bunch of Atmos rooms?
What's that?
Audrey.
No, not a bunch. I did one, only one so far, and it was a really small one.
Where?
For Phineas and Billie Eilish. It was a home studio.
Do you have what the configuration was? Was it pretty?
I did it with Blake Douglas, who I've been trying to bring in to this meeting. I think he would really enjoy this. So I just put the wiring in. He did pretty much everything else. So I don't have a lot of information for you.
It's okay. I just didn't know if you had wired up. It seems like over the last few months that quite a few people are at least moving toward that and developing their rooms toward that. So that's why I'm asking.
What I understood though is that room that they were putting in was mostly just for listening rather than trying to actually record in Atmos. And again, because I think they were saying that he wasn't going to try to submit anything in Atmos that was recorded in the room. He just wanted to
doesn't mix, so to my knowledge. So I can't imagine him mixing in that room.
Probably not. Again, the Atmos was mostly just going to be for him to listen back to stuff if they send him something to listen to. But it was interesting seeing all the different challenges come up that make it different from a standard system.
And what were they using as a controller?
Let me grab the book. I'll hang on a sec.
The infamous book.
Yeah.
Stephen, I got a question. I got a quick question for Stephen. How do you master an Atmos? I kind of know the answer to this question, but a lot of people are kind of approaching it differently. I just heard some stuff that Brad Blackwood did over at Euphonic. He just got his room, Atmosified or whatever. And, it's pretty amazing, but like, are you just treating it like multi-mono in terms of the stems you're feeding into the bridge? I mean, is that essentially how you're doing this? Because I hate this, I dislike companies applying loudness penalties and stuff like that. I don't like people dictating how I do my art. If I want to limit the crap out of something and make it white noise, I should be able to do that if I want to. I'm probably in the minority here with that. But in terms of mastering in Atmos, what is your approach to that?
I mean, I totally agree. I mean, the fascinating thing about Atmos is, I mean, at its base, it's really just it's exactly what you described. It's a format that enforces a specific set of standards in terms of overall playback curve, amount of headroom in the amplifiers. I mean, everything is dictated. So you have what we kind of, as engineers, we kind of always wish we would have, right? Like, just let me do whatever I want, and then you guys just put it all out at the same level, so I don't have to worry about my record's too quiet or my record's too loud or whatever. And some stuff requires more squeeze. That's the biggest challenge, honestly, is getting everything within their spec in terms of the deliverable spec for level, and actually having enough room to work. Because usually when stuff comes in from somebody like you, it's coming in pretty much fully formed. It really doesn't need a ton. But it's also coming in with the predominance of as you said, with music, the preponderance of music is still happening in the front three. So that's primarily where we're working.
Gotcha.
Very cool.
Okay. I had a question. Let me turn this back on. I went to an Atmos and they were talking about final level and the Dolby police about approval. And they were saying, so my understanding is you're supposed to come in at -18 LUFS. Maybe you've heard that, maybe Stephen can comment. If you hit 17.5, it'll get rejected. And some people have pushed it to 17.4 and passed the Dolby police. Any comments about that? And then the Dolby guy says, well, really your sweet spot is -23. That way you got plenty of dynamic range and on and on and on and on. I just wondered, what's the deal on that? Because it seems, again, another Wild Wild West component of Dolby Atmos music.
You're talking about the LUFS?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes. For one, It depends on where you're taking the LUFS rating from. If you're pulling it off the multi-channel ADM, you pull it off the 5.1 re-render.
The ADM.
They typically what I've been told is that to pull your rating off the 5.1 re-render, use that.
I know they have to do.
I don't know if that's correct, but I know that I know that works, and I know you can push it a little above -18 as well.
Yeah, the re-render, the 5.1 re-render is the only way that you can measure loudness.
Yeah,
I know that.
So if you push it to 16, they're going to reject it, but I think you're probably safe with most stuff in the -17 range. But it also depends on the content. If it's something if there's very little dynamic range and it's sitting up really, really hot, and if you're essentially clipping and then dropping your gain so you get enough headroom back, I think you're going to run into more problems if you have a dynamic waveform where you might have a couple little things that pop up that over time, yields a -17.4 or 17.5 or something like that. But it's like everything. I mean, it's like iTunes. Theoretically, for Apple Digital Masters, I'm supposed to deliver everything with 1 dB of true peak headroom. I can tell you for certain that I've never, ever, ever delivered a master with 1 dB of fucking true peak headroom on it. It just doesn't happen. So everything else. There's a standard, and then there's the fudge area, and sort of like you get good at playing in that gray area.
Wait, now, so you're saying that you go above -1 dB of true peak?
Oh yeah, all the time. And I've never had Apple reject a single master in, I don't know how long they've been doing that thing, that iTunes, master for iTunes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But gosh, almost 2 decades at this point, I think. It's been a minute.
And your LUFS you're running, you were again saying that you're running at -23.
Oh, no, not an LUFS rating. I'm talking about true peak.
No, I understand. But true peak, you're saying you can actually go above -1 with true peak. And then what was the LUFS that you said was working for you?
Oh, well, it depends. For Atmos or iTunes?
Say both.
For Atmos, you do have to stay below 1 dB true peak.
Right.
I was talking about, when I was talking about the true peak, I was actually referencing a master for iTunes, or what became Apple Digital Masters.
And the LUFS that you're using on the Atmos?
-1 true peak.
And what the LUFS? What's the LUFS? Is it -16? Is it
-18? Sorry, yeah. I'm sorry.
-18. Okay, great.
As the standard, with room for, like everything else, there is a little. I just wanted to illustrate that there is a little wiggle room. I've experienced that as well.
Does anybody else use that sound penalty plugin?
I have, yeah, sure.
Do you like it? Do you think it's accurate?
How would I know it's accurate? What is my standard? What is my calibration standard? It seems to follow. The plugin is fine, and then you can go to the website. The website, you can drag the file right on the browser window. It'll tell you right away.
I didn't know that. Right.
It's free. That's free too, but you have to render. You have to make a WAV file, and then you can drag it to loudnesspenalty.com for all of you. The plugin is just instant.
I had to stop using it because it was the classic thing of, let's do a mastered for YouTube, let's do a mastered for Spotify. I'm not going to do 6 freaking versions of your song for the world.
YouTube is the loudest, of course. YouTube is loudest. I don't know. I think there's a little bit too much emphasis on all this stuff here. I think the Dolby guy is kind of right in that, you're fine at -23, which all of us would go, God, that's so quiet. But if the program is dynamic, you're going to be fine. And I find that the streaming services turn it up. They just crank it.
That's the biggest thing with Dolby is that, if Dolby Atmos sounds good, I got to think the biggest share of why it sounds good in the most places is because there's so much headroom built into the system. You can't be taken out by gear topping out or amplifiers speaking out. Like, there's so much room for it to expand when it needs to expand. Like, that does, I guess the extra speakers is almost like the bonus when it comes right down to it. But
more things making more sound. It's for me, it's just so up in the air on Wild West. There's so many people doing it. Like Gary Lux only uses the objects and the LFE. That's all he mixes when he does his Atmos mixes. It's only objects and LFE, because when you do that, you're guaranteed that the binaural re-render is going to come out pretty close to what you're hearing in the room.
Yeah.
So when you don't use the LCR, you're assured of that. So I wanted to ask him, I said, you have all these PMC, you got a 916 system. He's got the 8-channel crown amp, and he's got those PMCs. They look like heating vents in the ceiling. They're square. Have you ever seen those? They're passive. Yeah, you got them. Okay, great.
The
I don't know the
wafer?
model number. And he has 4 of those in the ceiling.
CI series, yeah.
Yeah, and
You
2.
got CI 30s. These are CI 65s. Same
Yeah.
thing.
You got 2 of them on the side walls, 1, 2, and then 4 on the ceiling. So 8 total. And that 8-channel crown amp runs them. Single 8-channel crown amp.
Very, very similar to how I implemented
Yeah.
here, and for the same reason.
And of course,
What did you use for amplification?
I'm all Bryston, except I have my sides, my 2 side fills, my 2 wides, and the 4 ceilings are off one of those Crown DA amps.
yeah.
If you go in those Crown DA amps, when you avoid the analog input section of those Crown amps, they sound really good.
Using the Dante input, right?
Yeah. Everything else is, it gets integrated tomorrow. So
Did you say the front wides?
I do have wides in the front. I have 914 in here.
Yeah.
So are the wides the surround speakers? I'm sorry. I want to say quality or size, capability. Are they the surround, or are they the same as your left, center, right speakers?
They're the same. I have it's all PMC. So the fronts are IB1s, the left, center, and right, and the subs are XB2s, and then everything else is CI65. So all of my surrounds, my side fills, my wides, and all my ceiling speakers are the same.
So the wides, and you end up putting music mostly in the wides and leaving the effects in the left and right.
It depends. I mean, when you're object based, you're not really putting things in speakers. You're putting them in areas, so they wind up where they wind up.
And you have the subs on the surrounds as well, so you get full range on the surrounds.
Yeah, the subs are just the .1.
Oh, so you don't have a separate surround system for the surround? I mean, a subsystem for the surrounds?
No, it's a 220 square foot room.
You're going to be lucky to get it work in that smaller room.
I'm moving enough air in here as it is.
Gosh.
Yeah. Your system, I got to hear your system though, Mike. Oh my God, that sounds unbelievable, man.
What size is your room, Michael?
It's 30, again, from the back of the bass trap to the front behind the speakers is 32 feet.
And how wide?
And it's 19 feet wide.
Wow. Nice big room.
It's 19 foot 8 inches, I think.
That's how deep my room is.
With a 15 and a half foot ceiling.
Yeah. Nice size room. When's the party?
Well, as soon as we can do it. I'm telling you, Barry, we'll have breakfast over here. That'll be great. It'll be my pleasure. I'd love to have you guys over. And ladies.
We should do a road trip, a field trip for everybody coming over and checking it out. Seriously.
I'm willing to mask up and go around. I've been baxed and boosted. I'm so sick of sitting around the bloody studio by myself. I don't mean to be flippant, but I almost don't care at this point.
I think everybody's sick of being by themselves, dude. We're all tucked away in our little cubicles, and it's getting old.
I was happy when attended sessions went away for a hot minute. I was.
Hey, for the record, I'm triple vaxxed and I just tested positive. So
there you go. Yeah. There you go.
What the fuck?
But you're not dying though.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm
that's what I'm saying.
Mentally focused and ready to go. So yeah.
I know people who got sick after being, after 3 shots, but they're not in critical care. And by the way, there are others of us in this community who did not get shots, and they're not doing well. And so I'm worried about those people. I shall not name names, but I am worried about those people. Some of our people in our community are not doing well. So just, be careful what you're doing, guys. Yeah. Anybody else got anything new?
I got a question.
Bradley.
Yes, for Dylan or Steven, one of you guys might know. So talking about the Wild West, obviously on iTunes for music, majority of consumers are going to be listening binaurally, right? Or in spatial, so to speak. Does anyone actually know where they're deriving the spatial from off the re-renders? Somebody told me that they were actually deriving it off of a 512 re-render. Does anyone know when you deliver an ADM, if you've spent a lot of time, obviously they're not using the binaural re-render because, many people that I know have done work on the binaural and then it doesn't necessarily translate to Apple. So where does anyone know what is actually happening in that spatial codec when you submit your ADM? You've spent all this time on your 914 mix in the room, and then you've done some of your down mixing work in the renderer. Based on some of the stuff you're hearing, if you're listening, binaurally or spatially in Apple headphones, some of it's not sounding like it's translating very well. Do you guys have any insight on?
It's my understanding that they take it from MP4. You make an MP4 and they take it from that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, but which mix is the MP4 derived from, right? Because that's the whole thing. Is it derived from the 916 or 914 mix, or are they deriving it from, someone told me that they're deriving it from 512, which I don't think anybody's listening to that, or spending any time on that re-render. So I'm not currently mixing in Atmos yet, but I've talked a little bit with Steve Genowick, and I've got some friends that are, Rob Burrell in Nashville has been doing it for a long time. And so I'm kind of, doing a lot of research and trying to understand this, but I'm seeing the results of it or listening to the results of it on some of these records. And I'm just going is this really the new standard? Because I'm not hearing it. Are you guys hearing it?
I've been, in the 2.0 environment, I've been spatializing for a very long time. I got a nickname early on, 3D, which was because I had 3Ds in my entire name. Clients took that to mean that my mixes were very wide and spatial, which was a very in vogue thing in the late 90s, specifically in R&B music. You wanted to have super wide strings and background vocals and stuff like that. So I got really deep into every form of spatialization, whether it be Q sound, whether it be the Desper ones I'm big on, whether it be the Behringer Edison or software, or even just using a delay and creating a comb filtering Hans effect or something like that to, even by a sample or whatever. So I've heard good and bad forms of spatialization all over the place. One of my favorite engineered records is Amused to Death by Roger Waters, which has some fantastic examples of Q sound. I swear to God, I've heard it on airplanes and looked over my shoulder looking for the dog barking in the neighbor's backyard, listening to it and stuff. It's just a fantastic audio engineering thing where it doesn't sound just like weird phasey bull crap. I am hearing some weird phasey bull crap on binaural render. So I don't know the actual answer to your question as to what's, where it's derivative from. I thought it was from Atmos is better thought of as an environment, not thought of as a certain amount of speakers, because Atmos can be listened to in a 5.1 environment, or it can be listened to in a stereo, even speaker environment, or the headphones would be the binaural environment. So my understanding is it's the whole package system, and whatever gets downplayed is translated into their own spatialization. And that's where I think we're hearing some effed up stuff that's not translating well into certain stuff. This is why I think so many of us, I know a lot of mix engineers who would only work on their preferred hi-fi systems, and that they would never check on Oratones or NS10s even, because they just, I know these speakers really, really well enough to where I don't have to worry about the translation issues. Those same people are definitely listening through everything binaural on headphones to see if everything is translating properly. This also goes back to the fact that Apple has their own codec that's different from the Dolby one, which means we never really know what it's going to sound like whenever we're listening through this stuff. This infuriates the hell out of me because sure, it's going to be it's a small difference. I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill, but it is not the same. Absolutely not. It's been confirmed. Like people at Apple will tell you this, people at Dolby will tell you this. And so
I'm not sure it's a small difference either. You know, it's like, you know, because again, I haven't tested this with my own mixes yet, but like, you know, that what you're hearing as the binaural re-render is absolutely not what you're hearing as spatial, right? On coming off of iTunes, because if it were, hold on, I'm gonna have to jump, guys. I'll jump back on here in a second. I got somebody that showed up my door. Hold on one second. I'll be back.
I think we're nearing the end anyway there, Bradley.
Wow.
If I could throw something out, this is Lewis. Sorry, if I could throw something out, I'm just curious, like, you know, everyone who's mixing today in Dolby Atmos, whether it be music or film, I got a question for you. Are you utilizing the monitor section within the Dolby Atmos render itself? Or are you utilizing the physical speaker option? And for those who don't know, that's a selection of what the configuration, but it's the monitoring configuration, what you're listening back to.
You mean in terms of switching over to the binaural within the Dolby? I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
So the question is, when you're utilizing your Dolby render in the top left-hand corner of the Dolby render, right underneath the Dolby logo, it's a monitoring section, and in there you have your option of listening your playback. So to give you an example, how I do it is I leave my renderer, I leave my monitor control on the fullest speaker compatibility, which is 11.1.4. That's where it sits, right? I created that profile. It sits there. Then I go into the renderer and I listen to a 2.0, 5.1.4. I listen to a 7.1, a 7.1.4, all the different variations, including a 9.1.4, right? But if I want to listen to all 11 speakers, I have to go to physical. So I think the reason I bring this up is maybe for next month, anyone who wants to try this can talk about their experience. But, I did a small music project and I really, again, I have my binaural feed is coming out through Dante, going right into my SSL. And that's live. That's being fed live out. Okay. And then I also have from my JBL Internato, I have another stereo feed going in so I can A/B real quickly. Right? Just hit the buttons, cut, if you will. And then ideally, what I'm trying to say is that if you listen to your 5.1.4 and you kind of get your mix happy there, and then you expand it to your 9.1.4, 0.6, whatever have you, highest speaker, physical speaker location, and then see how that plays back. Go back to 5.1 and go back to your live feed and listen to your renderer without the Apple spatial, just a true binaural render. Okay, so you're not going to have that fun stuff of turning your head and getting that spatial balance happening. But I think you'll get a better mix from it. I think you'll hear it better to say, what Apple's doing is great. It's phenomenal, actually. But, you're not going to get that today in the studio. I don't know a way of getting that in the room today where you're going to get that playback of where your head positioning is. You know what I mean? If that's any help, I would tell you just go to the lowest you have, like a 5.1.4, and then monitor that, listen to your binaural, A/B that real quick, and then make your judgment calls on that. Because when you have a lot of speakers in a room, localization is going to be a little bit open, if you will, unless you sat there and did like I did to say that speaker sits at, minus 68, that speaker is at minus 32. That's zero, if you will, right? Because we don't have the luxury of inside of Pro Tools within the panel to have presets so we can create those. So we have to manually know those numbers. But try a 5.1.4 in binaural, A/B it, and then expand it to see how it sounds.
Did you have a question, John? Thanks, Lou.
No worries.
I do. Hi, everybody. Want to say hi, Dylan and Bruce and lots of people I know. Anyway, I just want to chime in my 2 cents, and there's a lot I could say on this subject. I've been working in just music, but in surround, primarily for film, but also for IMAX for decades. Mixing in all sorts of surround formats and recording in all sorts of surround formats, just music, primarily for film. The two things I want to say are, the first thing that makes me insanely crazy is that in Apple Music, by default, the binaural is on, or the Atmos is on, or whatever you want to call it. And to me, I know that sometimes the wrong codecs are being used, but even a bigger, higher level question is, a lot of times, the default comes on, and I think the Atmos mixes in stereo sound terrible, absolutely horrendously bad. And when you flip back to the stereo, you're like, yeah, that's how it should sound. Not in all cases, but in some cases. And the other question is, that's an overarching high level question, is how many places outside of movie theaters, okay, in terms of music setups, how many places in the world are properly set up to consume Atmos surround with all the speaker array? 100? 200? And my point is that in terms of actual stereo consumption, which is obviously like almost all music, is that Apple's ramming this stuff down our throat. By default, it's on, which I take great exception with. And my good buddy Ronan Murphy has been bitching about that too. And my point is, like, what harm is being done for what good? That's my point.
I agree.
99.9% of the world listens here on the iPods. I mean, it's all headphones or on your phone. That Chromebook commercial where they're saying, "Oh, and I have cinema quality sound on my Chromebook." I'm just going, "What? My kids." I got to tell you, they have 10 the SRM 10Bs in their room. They have what do they listen to? They watch on their laptop. They watch on an iPad. They watch stuff on their phone. That's the world. And all of this is we make it as great as it can be, so it gets boiled down to that, right? I mean, that's what Apple's allowing us to do, is still present something that's great for those who want to buy a $2,000 Atmos soundbar, or you can apparently get a good one.
Well, yeah, but you just said soundbar. And my point is that a good, punchy, phase coherent mix in stereo, to me, will every time will beat a phase trickery smeared horrible sounding Atmos fold down every time. So I don't care if it's in your car or your earbuds, but I'm saying, generally speaking, at a very high level, music is being harmed in so many cases, and that just breaks my heart. That's my 2 cents.
I don't disagree with any of that. In fact, I would echo most of those sentiments, and I think pretty much everyone in this room would. Frankly, I mean, we're all in concert. The one thing, and getting into this has been one of those things where it's taken so long to do this upgrade that it's made me ponder, should I even bother, so many times? And part of it is the frustration with the overall process and how it actually gets into the market. But the thing that made it make sense, and what finally coalesced around me to force me into the future, was when somebody said, stereo's great and it's going to remain in the real world if you were lucky, but surround and the whole head tracking thing is for the metaverse. And if you want to monetize musical content in this new space, it's going to have this surrounding head tracking. And I was like, all right, I got that. And when I thought about how much money that tech industry was going to throw at the metaverse, whatever that winds up becoming, probably basically a drug addict's den, because it seems like it's the dick. I think some kids are going to go in there and never fucking come back out. But it's, as Micah was saying, like his kids, they're on the iPad, they're on the thing. And, fast forward 5 years, 10 years, they're on the headset, they're on the headphones, they're in the metaverse, they're in another world. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll do it so I don't get left behind. But I agree with you. Like, it's a stereo mix. And as Dylan was saying, like, one person said to me, like, how are you going to, isn't Atmos more mixing than mastering? Like, how are you going to do it? And I said, well, in stereo, what I've been doing for decades is trying to take two-dimensional things and make them three-dimensional and give them image and give them width and height and depth and space. So in that sense, you're just translating creativity into three-dimensional space, and I get that. But if they're then going to make that the standard and make everything a fold down, I agree. What's the point?
Well, and most importantly, like, can we hear it that way? Right? That's my issue with Atmos right now, is that if I'm going to dive into this and spend money on it as an engineer, I want to know exactly what it's going to sound like to the consumer. And the fact that I cannot actually tell that right now, that's my biggest problem with Atmos right now, is that, I'm going to sit here and spend hours, days of my life tweaking this mix and doing my thing, whether that's on a 914 system or on, binaural re-render or whatever the case may be. But if then the consumer doesn't actually get what I've done, in my work, then this is all bullshit, and that's my biggest concern with the Atmos thing and my biggest disappointment. I was so hype about this when I first talked with Steve Jenowick about it a couple of years ago. I mean, I was like, yeah, dude, new revenue stream, like this is going to be cool as shit, all these things. And then, I started actually hearing it come out, and like John's saying, I was going, well, what? Like, this is not beating a stereo mix in any sense that I can hear, I mean, I've literally only heard, I think, one mix where I listened to it versus the stereo, and I was like, okay, all right, that's it. I've heard one. I've probably listened, I mean, I haven't spent a ton of time listening, but I've probably listened to 50 mixes or more. And these are major artists with huge budgets and, amazing mix engineers that have pedigree far beyond anything that I've got, and it's like, and it's not translating, I can't imagine that these guys are actually standing behind this and going, yeah, that's what I meant, like, really? Like, that's what you meant? I don't know, man. Like, that's my problem, is the minute that I can hear it and know that exactly what I do or what I get back from Steven, if I chose to send an Atmos to mastering, like if I can listen to that back in my room and approve it the way I can a stereo mix and say, man, that's it. That's what we meant, then game on. But until then, I'm just like,
well, Dylan, do you feel like your mixes are translating?
Well, like, whenever we were just talking about monitoring in a smaller monitoring in, like, say 5.1, whenever you're actually in your Atmos environment, and then later on spreading things out, I look at that the same way as whenever I would listen to Oratones to make sure things are translating well. That's how I typically work. I know people who mix on Oratones and then go to the bigger speakers to make sure that everything is really exciting and bumping. My philosophy is more like, listen on NS10s, make sure that everything's translating there, go to Oratones, make sure that if my kick drum's big on Oratones, it's going to be big on mains, is the philosophy. And so I kind of have a similar thing where I am listening. What I'm trying to address, the issue I'm trying to address right now, is not just A/Bing between Atmos and binaural, but also what I really want to be able to do is A/B between the binaural and my actual stereo mix, because that's where you're going to actually hear the differences, where you go, oh man, my stereo mix is, done so much better. And like I've said, I've been using spatialization techniques for long enough where I'm happy with my imaging, I'm happy with my sound staging and everything, where everything is placed in, a 2.0 system. So I should be more into the Atmos thing than I am. My bigger gripes are delivery specs and, stuff that I never had to think about whenever I was working on records, I don't like being dictated how I'm going to deliver my art. And when I'm doing that, and on top of all of this, we still have, we'll just say a youth perspective in terms of what the producers and the artists are hearing. So a lot of times you do get the artists that are like, they want things to be crazy. And I would way rather things translate and not fall apart than be crazy. And so if that's the trade-off, you want everything to, okay, we want everything spread out. Cool, we can do that, but let's make sure it translates well. If you can get both of those, yay. In my experience, that doesn't happen. There's always going to be a trade-off of putting this thing up here, back here, that's going to not translate as. But my biggest struggle with my Atmos mixing, again, I'm doing almost all music stuff, is where I place my vocals. My levels always seem to be too loud, too soft, or any of this stuff. And I have to live by the sword in a sense of, I always check my vocal stuff in the binaural on headphones to make sure that I'm not killing, it's not way too loud or way too soft. And I cannot tell you how many times where I've been like, oh man, I try and put it in the center section only, or center channel only. I try and do this and I try to do that. And for some reason, this crap still isn't really, like, one of the big things that I noticed was, and I talked to some other people who are mixing in Atmos, say like the people at Capitol or whatever. One of the things that I was noticing is if I took my vocal and I sent it to, say, a stereo reverb, and I panned the stereo reverb as objects someplace, or even as a bed in the back, right? So I have my vocal up here, but the reverb is actually at the tail of me. That tends to translate better than if I use the same, say, plug-in reverb that's actually a Atmos version of that, or even a surround version of that. For some reason, they seem to translate better down mix wise to go from a stereo reverb down to, whatever binaural setting you have, as opposed to actually using the thing that actually does spread it out to where you can put in, I don't know, a German opera hall or whatever kind of verb setting you want to do.
I've heard a lot of people say that same thing, Dylan.
Yeah, I mean,
Just
there's times whenever it doesn't, but I mean,
that's
that's my biggest struggles for translation have been my vocal levels and where they actually sit. And it's not as simple as, a lot of times you're like, man, these vocals aren't sticking out enough. They're getting kind of buried because there's so many instruments happening. Well, I usually try and carve out a space for the vocal, but sometimes it's like, let me just add a little bit more, like 2K, so the vocal pierces a little bit more. I go up on the mains and I crank it up. And if it hurts my ears, I've gone too far. But if I have my mains cranking and I'm turning them up and I'm like, okay, this doesn't hurt my ears, then I know that it's like, okay, that's a way for me to give more perception of the vocal being. I mean, even though I am boosting it in that one frequency range, it's more of a perception thing than it is an actual level thing. Sometimes I'll even boost 2K and turn the vocal down a little bit. I chase my tail way more than I ever did in stereo in Atmos, trying to get my vocal levels right. And the background vocals, that's also like another thing. Like I notice sometimes whenever I'm in stereo, if I have my background vocals here and people say turn the background vocals down, and I disagree with that, sometimes I'll actually just pan them out a little bit further. And the perception is that the vocal level is actually lower since they're actually coming out a little bit wider. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But in Atmos, it's just weird whenever I'm like, why am I doing, all these things that I never had to do whenever I was in the stereo environment. And that's why I think it takes me, even if I'm just working off stems, it takes me such a long time to turn in my Atmos stuff. Or the other people, they just have their template and they just crap it through that whole thing and that's done. And whenever I mentioned the engineers who are just taking an extra $500 bonus check and literally not even monitoring in an Atmos environment, that's a huge disservice to any of the point of any of this. So that's one of the things that I've been kind of struggling with.
Don't you feel like there's like distance issues with Atmos? Like that's what I'm hearing on all these mixes I listen to. It's like the vocals so like it's 10 feet in front of you and too verby. You know what I mean? Like the vocal sells the record. We all know that. It's like that's the whole point. And so to have the vocal be diminished in that sense in Atmos is where I'm kind of hearing what I feel like are those translation issues where it's like, surely that's not what they meant, right? But I think it, without having done it, I mean, I get the perception that people are putting it in that front center channel, but then when you do it as a re-render, if you're sitting in the middle of the room, that's actually like 10 feet in front of you, in the theoretical spatial space, right? And so it's like, have you had any success with actually moving it up as an object closer to the center of the room where it's like, then it's not so much because, I mean, with Atmos, you get a little bit of this artificial room anyway, right? Based on the size of the object that you build or whatever, like the smaller, you get more room the bigger the object is in that binaural re-render. And so it's like, what, are you having any success with that? Or is that still just like an impossibility?
It depends on, so like I think it was Barry that was mentioning somebody mixing only in objects. To me, that seems like a crazy idea, but I understand, the philosophy behind it of putting everything everywhere and stuff like that. It kind of depends also, because a lot of times the vocal stem that I'm dealing with already has the effects baked into it. And so that really should kind of be, in theory, if it's in a bed, it's supposed to translate. I've tried it every different way, and it just kind of depends on what I've got. Sometimes I find it works better if I'm using an object and I have it in the listener's sweet spot right up here. But then I have this, okay, does it sound like Adele is spitting in my face and everybody else is in Pasadena, from where I'm at or something. So, that's why I find myself checking it on all these different systems to make sure that I can okay, that's off. How do I get it back? And
what are you doing for duets?
I'm sorry?
Are you putting the person left? If you've got a duet, because that was the thing that I don't think translates really well when people, typically it would be like left center and right of center. No one is always in center. And then, but somehow when I listen to it on speakers, it's just like, that just seems off. And it's like everything else it just seems like spatially, like things were out of whack sometimes.
Well, Dylan, I was just going to chime in real quick. My experience in terms of mixing music of all different kinds, not just orchestral score, but with vocals and everything else, rock stuff, whatever. The thing to consider, which is both confusing and complicating, but also might help, is that phantom center, where something is mono and left right, is completely different to the brain than hard center, obviously. But it's also then like divergence, right? Like, can you put some of it into the side speakers? And I'm sure you know all this stuff. But it's in my experience, I'll just say that I'm really lucky, because when I'm mixing score or music or anything in 5.1 or 7.1, I'm constantly flipping back and forth on my Avocet between my fold down. And my fold down is just simple math. I don't use any phase plugins or no trickery. I just use the stock plug-in, just dropping the center some degrees and dropping the surround some. And that sounds to me by far the best. But the fold down always changes per project, of course. But it's this weird thing that if I put something phantom center, it sounds different in the fold down than hard center. And even adjusting the center level and all that stuff, right? Like, I understand the math of it, but there's just something weird that happens when it gets folded down. And I'm constantly, because checking back and forth, because I'm doing the album mix at the same time, the stereo album mix at the same time as the score mix. So for anybody here, if that's of any help, just consider divergence and consider hard center versus phantom.
But I didn't personally, I didn't have the same issues whenever I was mixing it. Like, I'm selling my 5.1 Avocet rig right now because I needed to upgrade to the Triumph so that I had the Atmos abilities. I never had these problems in 5.1. It's something specifically with Atmos where it's almost like too much. And there's some things where, like, whenever I listen to the fold down, I'm missing some stuff, but it honestly matters that much. You know what I mean? Like, we're getting way more of a benefit of the spatial immersive environment. If the road sounds like it drops in level a little bit because it was super wide, well, that's probably okay for the most part. But for my clientele, whenever they sign off on a stereo mix, they don't want anything to change. It's not my place to really change that stuff. And this is one of those things where I've been really lucky that I don't have to actually answer to people with my 5.1 mixes. I just submit them to the label and they just have QC check them out, make sure that I'm not like minus 14 LUFS or something outside of their spec. And so, I've been taking advantage of that. I've been taking advantage of not having to have the client come in and reapprove everything, because it's so freaking difficult for me to get approval to begin with, that now I'm going to have them go in and do all these. I run into this with like clean versions of songs. We have like a dirty version where there's all these, curse words in it, and I have to do a clean version. And the client wants to change the production. I'm like, so now I have to mimic all this BS we're doing right now back to the original thing. We're moving backward. Again, this is one of the main rooms that I work in. We have these movable walls that acoustically cover up the control room window, which I love because I don't have that reflection happening on one side. But the most important thing is if Mariah walks in and she sees a freaking vocal mic while we're mixing, she's going to be like, I could re-sing that ad lib. And now we're going back to overdubbing and we need the producer's involvement, all this BS. so it's a nightmare to show that off because, you know, it's the people are just going to think, oh, I can do this, I can do that. And you get sidetracked so quickly. Now, if they're like, hey, we're missing an ad lib and I can re-sing it, then we open up that door and we try to knock it out as quickly as possible. And then I close the door, like I close that movable wall as soon as possible, because I want there to be a mentality if that stage is done, we're back to mix mode and we're going to get this thing approved today and we're going to meet our deadline. And that's how we're going to do it. Bringing in the Atmos thing is like, here we go again, you know, and I've got clientele that get distracted very easily sometimes. And so, or even if they do hear one little thing, like they hear a little pop or a click within the stereo mix that was fine, but you can kind of hear it whenever things are spread out wherever your beds may be placed. Well, again, it's like, are we going back to the original and are we futzing with this? And, you know, it can be a multiple
isotope.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, that means I got to go back to the original stereo, isotope, declick that, and then reprint all the crap that I'm like, it's like stopping the process because they're going to be like, well, we should be taking the stems from the original stereo mix anyway. So now I have to go back, rebounce all those stems, and then go back. It's like I've stepped on a couple landmines of time wasters because of this format, because the clients are kind of getting used to it. And since I've got my home set up, I'm loving unattended sessions. I don't like people around me. I don't want to catch COVID. I just like being alone and working in my pajamas, you know. I find that it's, you know, nice to be able just to kind of work whenever I feel like it. I usually am I have more productivity because of that. But, you know, some people are different. But my point that I'm trying to make is that we don't have there's not a bunch of Atmos rooms, even at the major studios that are available. They're all booked. And so if my clients actually want to listen to my Atmos mix, they either have to listen to the binaural version in headphones, or they can listen to, you know, the version over at my house, which I'm just not inviting people over here. So I kind of have been answering to myself in terms of creatively what happens, but, you know, a lot of that means it's your responsibility if it ends up in the real world and it sounds like crap. You know, because I don't have a producer to blame at that point. It's all on me. So, you know, I'm a little bit more fortunate than some people, but there are times whenever I have to sit down and get approval, and you have the head of the record label come in and they're making stupid, you know, suggestions and stuff, and you have to kind of, you know, they're paying the bills, so we got to make sure that everybody in the room is happy. But, you know, you try to guide them and educate them as much as you can, and at the whole time still kind of going through the process yourself and finding new stuff where you're like, this is funky, how come this isn't translating the way I wanted it to, and I shouldn't do that. But you know, sometimes it just happens. Sometimes there's just weird anomalies that happen in audio. You can see this in stereo where you're like, man, there's this weird kick and bass thing that just happens, even though they're not flamming or anything. Just everything sounds like there's like the audio gets sucked out in this one weird place, and then you kind of nudge it a couple of samples, and bam, everything works perfectly. We see similar kind of things that are happening in the immersive environment now that are just weird things that you're sometimes rear the head.
You've talked about that a couple times now, of things not existing in the same space. Have you ever tried Track Spacer? You know that plugin? It's all like like the old concept of a keypex, right? Where you have things dip down when the vocal comes in.
I use it all. I mean, we get so many of the songs that I have to mix. We have an instrumental 2-track, and we just have to put vocals on top of it. And I put Track Spacer on the instrumental like all the time, so that when the vocal comes in, it dips out just that one.
Carves out of place.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, I do wish they would expand it a little bit more, but it's one of my top 10 used plugins.
I got a quick question. Are you seeing any productions where Atmos is first priority as opposed to an afterthought? All these stereo mixes sound like Atmos is an afterthought. Correct me if I'm wrong.
The only place that I've done it where it's been something that's thought of ahead of time is whenever I was mentioning earlier doing interludes. We actually were like, with interludes we could actually do this production that's going to have all this trippy stuff that's, you know, ceiling to floor, whatever. But no, I haven't run into any music where that's been a consideration so far. You know, Michael might have, you know, had some more of that with the you know, theatrical production that he does. There may be more of a consideration, you know, but I don't know, you know, even the concert stuff that I've done, there's not been any Atmos miking that's occurred. You know what I mean? Any of the live stuff that I've done has always just been the traditional multi-tracks that I get of however many mics are on the kick drum. That's what I've got, and maybe I have in addition a board feed as a reference or something, or the front of house feed. But I've not received anything that's been mic'd for Atmos, even like multiple audience. You know, I've only had stereo audience stuff.
So like a club track, like a Bruno Mars track is going to come in, and the producer's going to say Atmos only. Not going to happen.
Of course not.
No, I've never heard of anything like that. I mean, I've been pushing since I have the abilities and stuff. It's like one of these things where, hey, we could do it, you know, but that's up to the producer to kind of come up with, you know, if they want to do something, you know, that's why we started doing the interlude stuff, because I'm pushing them like, look, let's write stuff specifically that lets us dance in this crazy environment. And it won't necessarily matter so much if it's just trippy interlude stuff that gets folded down and maybe there's translation problems. Then whenever we go back to the song, whenever the songs kick in, it's just straightforward meat and potatoes.
Again,
and it just sounds great.
Yeah, 5.1 for music never took off outside of a concert, you know, DVD. So this is a deterrent for music, or this is a bad path for music, and that's my 2 cents.
Well, thank you all for everything.
Yeah, we've got to kind of running out of time.
We've gone over by 20 minutes, but it was great.
Really good.
You guys want to talk more about this? I mean, we can definitely, you know, set up a road trip. If you want to go to Mr. Bodeker's place, that might be kind of cool.
Yes. Party at Michael's.
Maybe
sometime
in February.
We need a magic egg.
No, February would be too early. February.
So when do you think you're going to have it up and running? March?
Oh, thank you for pushing me on that. I'll tell you in February. I'll answer that question in February or in March.
Let us know, sir.
I would think towards June or July.
Okay.
I mean, NAMM show is going to be a test. Whether we all get together live at the convention center for the NAMM show in June, we'll see what COVID is like then. The summer would be great.
Sounds good. Thank you all for coming. Let us know how we can make it better for us. All right. Thanks for everything, y'all. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Later.
Tony, thanks, Barry.
My pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
See everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.